You're most famous for your work on climate change and debunking some of the consensus on that issue and trying to fight against the alarmism that we see all the time in the mainstream media. Last week, NPR, blaring headlines, Arctic ice in sharp decline, lowest point ever measured. CBS, NBC, featured stories, nightly news casts. What's your reaction to this story? Does it help make the case for serious man-made global warming?
These stories are like in Animal House. Every spring the toilets exploded, and every Halloween the trees are filled with underwear. Every September, NPR writes stories about record Arctic ice loss, and the Antarctic gets no attention. Global sea ice gets no attention. The fact that ever goes back 30 years gets no attention. So it's more of the same. In fact, the first chapter in Red Hot Lies I found hilarious. I still laugh when I read it. Was about the media games. This is what they do. This election season, it's weather. They're going to say that weather is now climate if it's the right weather, and they're saying it's escalating now as we speak because of the campaign and because it's frustrating the global warming industry that this issue is not part of the campaign.
Well, that's another thing. I mean, there's a lot of people, not as many people are talking about climate change these days. Part of that's due to the bad economy. Maybe part of that's also due to the fact that more people are skeptical of the science. But when you say you're skeptical of the science, and I know I've had this problem myself, or somebody in the media does, the mainstream media says, well, you're a denier. And their proof of that is that what they claim is that 97%, 95% of climate scientists all agree. The science is settled, and they mock you. They try to shame you into being quiet. How do you fight back against that if you're an individual, just a regular Joe on the internet?
Well, first of all, that indicates there must be an awful lot of deniers out there, because the reason the president's not pushing this, even though two stories in major publications, New York or New Yorker, and then another, was it Mother Jones anyway, their publications have said his top priority, according to AIDS, if reelected, is going to be the climate agenda. Oddly, the, quote, greatest threat facing mankind, parenthetical, except for all the others, agenda item is not something he wants to push. He must think there's an awful lot of deniers out there. Or, the two factors you pointed out, sort of, they come together here very well. There's an old saying, I'm told it's Chinese, that when there's food on the table, there are many problems, and when there's no food on the table, there's one. Mm-hmm. This is not the time to promote what is, according to everyone, all computer models on which this is based, by the way, not observations, not looking at the window, not reality, but computer model projections of the future. They all acknowledge that anything ever proposed, including the so-called global treaty, Kyoto, if perfectly implemented, pause, wait for laughter, would have zero detectable impact on the climate. It is an expensive, futile gesture. Why not now? I don't know. Is this a good time for expensive, futile gestures?
Well, it also raises the question that if this is such an emergency, if this is the biggest thing facing the world, why start with Obamacare? Why start with something that's not going to save the world from utter destruction?
And his biggest regret, he said, was not getting comprehensive immigration reform through.
That's right, not cap and trade.
Right, and he didn't even try to get comprehensive immigration reform through. He did try cap and trade. Let me say this. If you want to avoid this discussion and just save people the embarrassment and the indignity of going down the denier road, you can just ask, I have an idea. You're right. I agree. In fact, it's probably worse than you say. So, and here's where it gets difficult. What do you do about it? And please don't use the word act now or something, because I don't know how to pass that. So, all in favor of doing something, say aye. So far, that's where the political debate is. And in wealthy times, that's how we got here. Well, we should do something. This is something. Therefore, we should do this. Now, people aren't really buying that. And so you ask them, just tell me what it is you want to do. And then I'm going to ask you a very mean question. What will the temperature be after that? If that's too mean, let me ask you an easy one. Will it be any different? And I'm preparing to release the balloons because that will make you the first person in history to actually claim that it will be detectably different. No computer model, none of them. And it's entirely premised on computer models. So let's just put them in as the crazy ants in the attic right now. Let's trot them out and say, type in whatever your act now do something is into this computer and show me what it will do.
What the result is.
No model, including EPA's, says it would detectably impact the climate. Reasonably, rationally, it can't be about the climate. It may be about your need for this, for saying, I knew we were evil. Every man is agent of doom theory that rolls down the Autobahn has an enormous immediate following, regardless of how much scrutiny it gets from them. I knew it, they say. It affirms my worldview.
Despite all, you're making these great points here, but despite all this, the mainstream media never asks these questions. Now, is it because the mainstream media is so wedded to this idea that they would look stupid if they went back on it now? Is it because they really believe it? Or is it because, for some political purpose? Why ignore all these important questions that you're raising?
Until somebody comes out with a confession, I don't know how to prove your first point, but I think there's probably a lot of that in there. Boy, wouldn't we look stupid now.
Well, they would.
Yeah. So I also see, it's kind of like this claim of media bias in debate moderators or wherever. It's not necessarily political to them. It's cultural. It's a worldview. It's just how they see the world. They claim tolerance for other perspectives and then are always shocked that there are other perspectives. They're the Pauline Kaels, writ very large. The woman who said, I can't believe Nixon won the election. Nobody I know voted for him.
Right.
They're like that. Why? How did this happen? It must be rigged. And in this case, well, anybody who doesn't believe this is a loon, because I know all good people. All people I know believe this. Therefore, all good people know this. It's a very uncomfortable issue for the media, and if only because, and again, the first chapter of Red Hot Lies walks through all of this. There's an awful lot of, how do we roll this one back? Do we just say we've always been at war with East Asia, Winston, like we did from cooling to warming? I think that, yeah, whatever credibility they have left is at stake if they were to say, sorry.
Too much invested in it.
But also, there is a real narrative here. Let me tell you a quick story. How did I get into this? So I'm innocently practicing law in Washington, and Enron asked me to be Director of Federal Government Relations. This is 1997, before there was a global warming treaty. And I find myself on my second day in office, sitting around a table with BP, American Gas Association, Niagara Mohawk Power, Union of Concerned Scientists, and a bunch of them. And I asked one of the industry folks, because I hadn't learned about rent-seeking businesses or Baptist and bootlegger coalitions, why are we sitting around a table with people who want to put us out of business, trying to figure out how to get a global warming treaty and get the U.S. involved, exempt countries where Enron is building coal-fired power plants, get cap and trade domestically? And the industry guy next to me, who I do remember, said something that's paraphrased as, well, they want to put the other guy out of business first, and they'll never grow all the way. So we bought a bunch of uneconomic stuff, windmills and solar panels, and these will become spectacularly economic if we get our way. There's an old Far Side cartoon. Two spiders spin a web at the base of a playground slide. And one turns to the other and says, if we pull this off, we'll eat like kings. And that was Enron and BP with other wind and solar losers. They bought them on the cheap because they're uneconomic. And then they're going to be spectacular cash cows if their political capitalism succeeds. So anyway, I'm this crazy guy on the street corner for 3 years. I leave almost immediately. And I'm muttering about this evil company with all its schemes of trying to make money doing nothing. Not a message that anybody wanted to receive for the Clinton-Gore administration's favorite energy company, the Bush administration's supposed favorite energy company. And then the unpleasantness with Enron occurs, and they say this is a Bush issue. This guy who writes for the Washington Post comes, and he writes a story. It's December 26th or something, 2001. And he comes to CEI and interviews me, and I explained to him how this was, in fact, I was saying this is a company that you got to watch out for. They're up to no good. When I asked, how can you do something economically harmful? It's beneficial to us, and so on. And I walked him through it in much more detail than I just did now. And he says, I suppose I could say that you're saying they weren't that bad after all? And I said, what in the world did I say that gave you that opening? And he said, well, global warming. That's all you had to say. Real quickly, it's the Team America movie where help me, Alec Baldwin, the dear leader.
Yes.
And he goes, global warming, big business, corporations. It just, all you have to do is say global warming and they know.
Speaking of pop culture, it's interesting you brought that up. It's not just adults. When I was a kid, I remember in school all the time and being told about how the Earth was going to end in one form or another, whether it was global warming, the ice caps melting, whether it was walking around knee-deep in garbage by the time I was 20 years old. But what I didn't realize was that there was this concerted effort by the media to sell me on this stuff through other genres. Can you talk a little bit about how young people are being indoctrinated, so to speak, not just through school, but through the entertainment industry?
It's true. There's I saw President Romney, excuse me, Governor Romney, criticized for not showing up at a Linda. They're saying a Nickelodeon event, but it was a Linda Ellerby.
Linda Ellerby, that's right. Big liberal.
She makes an appearance in Red Hot Lies because she had a big global warming kick going on. She was cramming this into the most innocents' heads as a faith, and it is a faith. It's happening, yes, in the schools. It's happening throughout pop culture. I'm raising 2 small boys right now, and it's in most everything. Green, basically. It's generally more subtle at this point.
Well, you even see sometimes during certain times of year, they show the little green logo in the corner of the screen.
GE Wind, which used to be Enron Wind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, they do have, they're rent seekers. When you rob Peter to pay Paul, Paul is enthusiastically supportive.
But the media is doing that specifically
But NBC and GE have a very, they're one and the same for these purposes.
Okay.
And GE, whose lobbying budget is bigger than big oil combined, has a lot of, it's not your father's GE. They retooled it to be, when Jeff Immelt said we're all Democrats now, the government's moved in and it's not going away, might as well just enjoy it. He's saying that's not Jack Welch's GE. He has redesigned this company to be windmills, more expensive turbines, make people buy their stuff, designing around either government requirements or government contracts. So, but the kids are getting it in many ways, and I think any parent out there knows this. The results aren't funny. In Red Hot Lies, I chronicle, in Australia, we had the first reported case of a child being committed because his circuits just melted down. He refused water because he had been told so often and in so many ways that he was contributing to an ongoing ecological crisis just over the horizon in Shelbyville. I know things seem well here, but they're not there. Or over the calendar, which is always how it is. And this poor child was committed after melting down and refusing even water. His system couldn't take what he'd been subjected to.
That's an
anymore.
extreme example, but I mean, polar bears are the more normal one. We're all young kids are all terrified that we're going to wipe out the cute polar bears.
Mm-hmm. And an Alaskan native was brought down for a show by this industry in Washington, and I think MRC covered it. The poor girl who's being obviously used and manipulated, and not being treated with the gloves that her circumstance obviously required, melted down. She obviously was really having a very difficult time coping anymore, and did this on film, and the people using and abusing her were sitting there saying, yes, great, that works. I cite a poll, everything's polled now. In the UK, the spectacular number of parents reported their children having nightmares over ecological crisis, global warming specifically. And there, it got so bad they had mainstreamed until they went too far. Truly despicable methods. You may have seen the teacher who said, okay, now who believes in global warming? Not you, that's okay. No, Jimmy and Kathy, that's fine. That's okay. And then she presses a button and they explode. And these were the stars, the glitterati of their entertainment industry behind this. They'd recruited football, soccer players and their producers and their famous actors and so on. And they were blowing up children for not accepting the dogma.
Why are these environmental issues, particularly global warming, so appealing to celebrities?
It's cheap virtue. I mean, or politicians. But celebrities need a cause. I go back to the old Jeff Goldblum, before he was Jeff Goldblum, line in a Woody Allen movie. He's out at a party in Hollywood, and he calls his agent, panicked. He says, I forgot my mantra. They need a mantra. They need a cause.
And they're just not smart enough to understand tax reform, right?
George Clooney will probably hop at his limo and then get dropped off around the corner to drive in his little spec vehicle, and without a glove compartment to put his Oscar in for driving up in it, and get all sorts of cheers, the rapturous Vanity Fair green issue and so on. It's fashionable. To them, it's fashion. They wear it like anything else, like the devil wears Prada. Now, it's very fashionable to politicians. Why? It's never fixed. Nothing ever proposed would detectably impact it according to anybody. Well, when Kyoto was agreed in December 1997, and the media is so objective on this, by the way, during the Bush presidency for 6 years, they said Bush refused to sign a treaty.
Why haven't you signed Kyoto? Why haven't you said right?
Well, he should have just come out and said, Bill Clinton signed Kyoto. I can't sign this any more than I can sign the Treaty of Versailles and finally put an end to the horrors of World War I. Why don't you talk to Senator Clinton? Why doesn't she seek ratification? But for politicians, it is a bottomless well. There's always another research center. There's always another grant. There's always another opportunity to show how much you care, to emote, to say, look what I did. I created these jobs. You can create jobs in anything by throwing $90 billion at it. If we threw $90 billion like we did at Green Jobs, at Pet Rocks, Pet Rock would be issuing press releases announcing record growth.
Hire people to dig holes, hire people to refill them.
Right, and you don't have a higher electricity prices.
Do you remember Captain Planet?
It rings a bell.
Cartoon from when I was a kid? Environmental. How about, did you hear about the Lorax, the movie The Lorax?
Yes. I found my kids watching it the other day at a furniture store.
It was cute. But it was environmental alarmism all the way.
Yeah.
All the trees are going to be gone. You cut down the trees, you're going to make fuzzy creatures upset. Okay, so...
Let me just one thing.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is my kids are not being taught outside of the home that petroleum saved the whales. And if you don't know, go find out why. Coal saved the forests. If you don't know, go find out why. And so on. Wealthier is healthier, wealthier is cleaner. Which countries are dirty? Rich or poor? Well, we know the rich are the problem, except... Really? Go to Haiti and ask them about their Clean Air Act and what parts per trillion they're measuring in now. And they're going to say, food, fuel, medicine, shelter. When I get rich, I'll regulate in the parts per thousand. When I get richer, I'll regulate in the parts per million. I get really rich, I'll regulate in the parts per trillion. When I get so spectacularly rich, I'm foolish and I've lost all connection to where I came from, I'll pretend I can control the weather. But for now, I need food, fuel, and medicine. And then I'll assign economic values to various environmental media. Kids aren't being taught that. Politicians clearly haven't been taught it because very few will say it.
Last question, and thank you so much for your time today. We're at your house. I want to mention this to you. You were kind enough to open up your doors to us, and it's beautiful here. This is gorgeous. I wish I could just stay here all day.
You know why I moved out here? I lived 2 blocks from your office, and Greenpeace was taking my trash every day, every week, every Sunday night.
What did Greenpeace do to you? There's a quote on the back of your book, Red Hot Lies. Or no, which one is it? It
well,
says,
the first chapter in one of them is Greenpeace steals my trash.
They called you a climate criminal, and that's the blurb on your book, from Greenpeace, climate criminal.
They were putting my face up. For some reason, they needed their ground troops to know what I looked like at all of these Kyoto negotiations I would go to. And they were taking my trash and a White House aide's trash at the same time because they were just convinced that we were engaged in something. This is the same White House I'd sued, by the way, on related issues. Phil Cooney, the guy Al Gore smeared. And they were taking my trash. And I found out by pure happenstance that we were both having our trash
It's
removed
Greenpeace, though. Are you
night.
sure they weren't just going through it looking for food and
No, they were
clothing?
removing it. They were removing it. And you may have noticed I had 2 large breed dogs at the time, and I was very meticulous about following local ordinances about picking up after them when I learned about this. And by the way, the stuff they thought was mine and said was mine, I was putting things in there because I'd learned they were giving my trash every week to National Journal, Roll Call, and the Washington Post, all of which said, well, so what? Read their website. Yeah, he opposes Kyoto. But they wanted more, so they finally got The Guardian in the UK to run a story without calling me, cobbling together unrelated things, and doing this big Bush's man in Washington thing in Brussels, because I'd been commuting, working in Brussels with the senior members of the European Parliament. So they didn't like that. Speech is not to be protected unless it's the right kind of speech.
Does environmental alarmism come back into fashion? Does the media start talking about it all the time? And if so, how do we react?
Well, my reaction is going to be, in reverse order, is going to be to continue, no matter who wins the election, to try to get out the internal discussions among the activist media and bureaucrats and other public servants.
Do you see them ratcheting it up, though? Ratcheting back up the environmentalism and the
Absolutely. This is my tool to deal with the inevitable. Why is it the inevitable? Well, so far, you can't name a recession that never ended. People feel like we're in a recession, even though it ended 3 years ago almost.
Right.
3 years ago. And there are a lot of signs that we're going to go back into the downturn, which is really the worst thing for this movement that is about the white, wealthy Western world. 4 Ws. The 4 Ws of the environmentalist movement. This is a wealthy, white, Western movement. Poor countries want to develop, and when they do, because they know wealthier is healthier, and they know wealthier is cleaner, and when they get rich, then they assign economic values to clean up of this, that, and the other, and then the weather. It's rich countries that pay for this, and it's healthy economies that then say, okay, well, we should do something. Always pretending, it's like baseline budgeting. Always pretending we're starting at zero. Well, yeah, we should do something. Do you know, after all this, the windmills that were marketed, first commercialized in the 80s, the 1880s, we're told, isn't it time we began investing in these? When Jimmy Carter increased their subsidy, and people fall for it, well, yeah, I guess it's time we began investing in windmills. So we're going to hear when the economy recovers that we must do this about that. And controlling the weather, a climate control treaty will no longer be as far-fetched. It'll be more near-fetched because this is a curse of prosperity. It's the peril of prosperity, is you find yourself pursuing the well-funded claimed threats. The squeaky wheel will get the grease in a healthy economy, and this is certainly that. There are an awful lot of Pauls who are supporting this agenda. But right now, people aren't buying it. And the good news is we still have time for people to recognize, even if the economy roars, nothing ever proposed would detectably impact the climate. It may be about something, but it's not apparently about the climate. It's certainly not about a climate crisis or emergency. So yes, the answer is yes. It's going to come back. It's going to come back with a vengeance that will run concurrent with the economy. But so do CO2 emissions, oddly enough.
Right.
And so you're going to see, as CO2 emissions go up, that means employment's going up and household wealth is recovering, and people will be more susceptible to, well, yeah, I'll pay a little more. And so you just need to finish the sentence. To do what? Because I'll pay a little more to control the climate. I hope you know this is an expensive gesture. And if you're okay with that, it's a rational decision.
Christopher Horner, the book is The Liberal War on Transparency. When did it come out? It's pretty new, right? It's
1 week ago.
1 week ago. So you'll be seeing it on the New York Times bestseller list, I'm sure, very, very shortly. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.